Hello, sweet soul. Welcome back to another rainy evening together. Tonight's episode is called The Late Shift. Outside, the rain has been falling since dusk. That gentle, persistent kind that turns the city into something softer, something quieter. The streets are mostly empty now, just wet pavement catching the glow of street lamps. Just the occasional car passing slowly through puddles. And here we are, you and me, finding a little pocket of peace in the middle of it all. Tonight I want to share 5 true-to-life stories with you. Each one takes place during those quiet hours when most of the world is sleeping. The late shift hours, the overnight moments, the spaces between one day ending and another beginning. These are stories about ordinary people doing ordinary work, finding small moments of connection, noticing the beauty in routine, discovering that even the most unremarkable hours can hold something tender. If you enjoy these rainy bedtime diaries, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. That way, you'll always know when a new episode is ready to help you drift off to sleep. Now then, let's settle in. Let the rain wash away whatever the day brought, and let these stories carry you somewhere peaceful. Our first story begins in a hotel lobby, where the night is long and the front desk is quiet. This one is called the hotel desk. I took the overnight shift at the Greenleaf Hotel 3 months ago, and I've grown to love it in ways I never expected. When I first started, I thought the hours would feel endless. 11 at night until 7 in the morning. 8 hours of silence and boredom, I imagined. 8 hours of fighting to stay awake while nothing happened. But it wasn't like that at all. The Greenleaf isn't a large hotel. 42 rooms spread across 4 floors. A small lobby with deep green carpet and leather armchairs. A fireplace that management keeps lit from October through March. Brass fixtures that someone polishes every morning until they glow. Tonight, the rain started around 9. By the time I arrived for my shift, it had settled into a steady rhythm against the lobby's tall windows. The kind of rain that sounds like it plans to stay a while. Marcus was finishing up when I walked in. He works the evening shift, 3 to 11. A patient man in his 50s who always leaves the desk perfectly organized. Pens lined up. Reservation book positioned just so. A fresh pot of coffee waiting in the back office. "Quiet night," he said, sliding his jacket on. Room 23 asked for extra towels around 8. I already took care of it. Everyone else has been settled since 7. I thanked him and took my place behind the desk. The chair there is worn in all the right places. Soft leather that's shaped itself to fit whoever sits in it. I've spent enough hours in this chair that it feels almost like home now. Marcus paused at the door, umbrella in hand. "Oh, and there's a late arrival expected. Reservation under the name Park. Flight was delayed, so she might not get here until after midnight." I made a note of it. Then I watched Marcus disappear into the rain, his umbrella a dark shape against the glowing street. For the first hour, I simply existed in the stillness. The fire crackled softly across the lobby. Rain tapped against the windows in no particular hurry. The old grandfather clock near the elevator marked each passing minute with a gentle tick. I straightened papers that didn't need straightening, checked emails that had already been answered, made a slow circuit of the lobby, adjusting magazines on the coffee table, pushing armchairs back to their proper angles. There's something meditative about these, Small tasks. They don't require much thought, just attention, just presence, just the quiet satisfaction of making things neat. Around 11:30, I poured myself a cup of coffee and settled back behind the desk. I'd brought a book tonight, a collection of essays about ordinary life. The kind of writing that finds meaning in grocery lists, in morning commutes, in the way light falls through kitchen windows. I read slowly, savoring each paragraph. There's no need to rush anything on the late shift. The hours are long enough to hold whatever you want to put in them. A guest came down around midnight, a man in his 60s, soft gray cardigan, reading glasses perched on his nose. He nodded at me as he crossed to the coffee station we keep in the corner of the lobby. "Couldn't sleep," he said, pouring himself a cup of decaf. Time zones still have me confused. Flew in from Singapore yesterday morning. My body has no idea what hour it's supposed to be. I smiled sympathetically. The rain usually helps. Give it an hour, and it might lull you back to sleep. He considered this, cradling his coffee cup. You might be right. There's something about rain in this city. It's gentler than I expected. The rain in Singapore comes down like it's angry about something. This feels more like a conversation. I liked that description. Rain is conversation. A quiet back and forth between sky and earth. He settled into one of the armchairs near the fireplace, and I went back to my book. For 20 minutes or so, we simply shared the space. Two people awake when most of the city slept, finding companionship in silence. Eventually, he finished his coffee and rose with a small wave. "Think I'll try again. Thank you for the company." I watched him walk to the elevator, his slippers shuffling softly on the carpet. The doors closed behind him, and the lobby was mine again. Just after 1, the front door opened, and a woman hurried in from the rain. She was perhaps 30, a rolling suitcase behind her, umbrella dripping onto the welcome mat. Her coat was damp at the shoulders where the rain had found its way past her umbrella. But she was smiling despite it all, a tired, relieved kind of smile. "I'm so sorry for the late arrival," she said, approaching the desk. "My hasty flight was delayed 3 times. I started to think I'd end up sleeping in the airport." "Miss Park?" Her smile widened. "That's me, Jenny Park. You were expecting me? The evening clerk mentioned you might be coming in late. Let me get you checked in so you can rest." I found her reservation and processed everything quickly. She filled out the registration card with neat handwriting. I noticed she used a fountain pen, pale blue ink. There's something reassuring about people who still carry fountain pens. "Room 31, I said, handing her the key. "3rd floor, end of the hall. It's one of our quieter rooms. Faces the back garden, so the street noise won't bother you." She looked at the key in her hand with something like gratitude. "A quiet room sounds perfect right now. It's been such a long day. Can I bring anything up for you? Tea, perhaps? We have chamomile, peppermint, and a lovely lavender blend." Her eyes softened at the offer. "Chamomile would be wonderful, if it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all. I'll bring it up in about 10 minutes. Give you time to settle in." She thanked me and wheeled her suitcase toward the elevator. I watched her go, then headed to the small kitchen behind the desk where we keep supplies for exactly these moments. I filled the electric kettle and set out a proper tea tray. One of the nice china cups with the ivy pattern, a small pitcher of honey, 2 shortbread, cookies from the tin we keep for guests. cloth napkin folded into a neat triangle. These details matter, not because they're expected, but because they communicate something. They say, "You are welcome here. You are cared for." The world may be chaotic, and flights may be delayed, and rain may soak your shoulders. But in this small space, someone is paying attention. I carried the tray upstairs, moving slowly to keep the tea from spilling. The hallway on the 3rd floor was hushed, just the soft hum of heating vents and the distant sound of rain against the windows at each end of the corridor. I knocked gently on room 31. She answered in stockinged feet, having already changed out of her travel clothes into soft pajamas. Her hair was down now, falling past her shoulders. She looked younger somehow, more at ease. "Oh, this is lovely," she said, taking the tray. "You didn't have to do all this. It's what we're here for. I hope you sleep well, Miss Park." She looked at me with genuine warmth. "Jenny," she said. "Please call me Jenny, and thank you. Really, this might be the kindest thing anyone's done for me all week." I walked back to the lobby with that warmth still lingering. This is what I've come to love about the late shift. These small moments of connection. The chance to offer kindness when someone least expects it. The quiet privilege of being present when the rest of the world has gone to sleep. The hours between 2 and 4 are the deepest part of the night. The rain had softened to a whisper. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. I added another log and watched it catch, orange flames curling around the dry wood. I made another circuit of the lobby, checked that the front door was secure, wiped down the coffee station, straightened the newspapers on the rack by the elevator, even though no one would read them until morning. Then I returned to my book, read another essay, this one about the author's childhood memories of summer thunderstorms. The way she described the sound of rain on a tin roof reminded me of my grandmother's house. I hadn't thought about that in years. Around 3:30, my phone buzzed. A message from my roommate. "Left soup in the fridge for you, the potato kind you like. See you when I get home from work." I smiled at the screen. Nina and I have opposite schedules now. She works days at the elementary school 2 blocks from our apartment. I work nights here. We communicate mostly through notes and text messages, and the meals we leave for each other in the refrigerator. But it works, somehow. We've developed a rhythm. She leaves coffee brewing for me on mornings when I come home exhausted. I make sure dinner is ready when she gets back from teaching. We pass each other like ships, but the affection remains constant. I texted back a simple heart emoji and a thank you. Then I put my phone away and listened to the rain. At 4:15, another guest appeared. A young man in a rumpled business suit, looking exhausted in that particular way that comes from being awake too long. He walked to the desk, set down his room key, and gave me a weary smile. "I have to catch a 5:30 flight," he said. "Is there any chance I could get the bill now? I want to make sure I have time for everything." "Of course. Room 14, is that right?" He nodded, stifling a yawn. I processed his checkout efficiently. He'd been with us 2 nights, business travel, based on the conference bag I'd seen him carrying when he checked in. The bill was straightforward. Room charge, 1 meal from room service, nothing else. "Your taxi should be here in about 20 minutes, I said, handing him the receipt. "I called ahead when I saw your checkout time in the system. Would you like some coffee while you wait?" His tired eyes brightened just slightly. You already called the taxi? We do our best to anticipate. He shook his head with a small laugh. This hotel, I'm going to recommend it to everyone I know. I poured him coffee, black with 2 sugars, as he requested, and he settled into one of the lobby chairs to wait. We didn't talk much. He was too tired for conversation, and I understood. Sometimes the kindest thing you can offer someone is the space to be quietly exhausted. His taxi arrived right on time, headlights cutting through the last of the darkness. Dawn was still an hour away, but the sky had begun to shift almost imperceptibly from black to deep blue. "Safe travels," I said as he headed for the door. He turned and gave me a genuine smile. "Thank you for everything." The last hours of my shift passed gently. I finished my book as the sky continued to lighten. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the world washed clean and fresh. Through the lobby windows, I could see the first hints of pink on the eastern horizon. I prepared for the morning clerk's arrival, restocked the coffee station with fresh supplies, wrote up a brief summary of the night's events, made sure the fire was properly banked, positioned everything just as Marcus always leaves it for me. Sonia arrived at 6:45, 15 minutes early, as always. She's worked the morning shift for almost 20 years, knows every guest's preferences, remembers birthdays and anniversaries, the kind of person who makes a hotel feel like home. "How was the night?" she asked, setting her purse beneath the desk. "Peaceful," I said. "Late arrival in room 31, early departure from 14. Otherwise, just rain and quiet." She nodded approvingly. The best kind of night. I gathered my things, book in my bag, empty coffee cup, rinsed and put away, jacket on. The morning air would be cool and damp after last night's rain. As I stepped outside, the first real light of dawn was spreading across the sky. The street was quiet. Puddles reflected the pale morning glow. Somewhere nearby, a bird was beginning to sing. I walked toward the bus, stop, breathing in the clean, rain-washed air. My body was tired, but my mind felt clear and calm. 8 hours at the hotel desk. Small kindnesses offered, quiet connections made. The city waking up around me now. I'd go home and eat the soup Nina left for me, take a warm shower, climb into bed just as the sun cleared the rooftops. And I'd sleep deeply, knowing that tonight I'd return to the green leaf and do it all again. There's dignity in this work, purpose in these small hours. The late shift has taught me that when the world is sleeping, someone needs to keep watch. Someone needs to pour the tea and call the taxis and offer kindness to strangers passing through. I'm grateful it gets to be me. And as the bus approached through the quiet morning, I found myself thinking of another kind of night work entirely. A different building, a different kind of quiet. A story about aisles and inventory lists, and the peculiar peace of being alone among shelves of ordinary things. A story I call the Grocery Restock. The parking lot of Morrison's Market was nearly empty when I arrived for my overnight shift. Just my car, the manager's sedan, and the delivery truck that was already backed up to the loading dock. Rainwater pooled in the low spots of the asphalt, catching the glow of the parking lot lights. Everything had that fresh, washed quality that comes after a long rain. I'd been working the restock shift for almost a year now, 10 at night until 6 in the morning, unloading trucks, filling shelves, rotating stock so the older items moved to the front. making sure that when customers arrived in the morning, everything would be exactly where they expected to find it. It's not glamorous work, but there's something satisfying about it. Something almost meditative about the rhythm of open, unpack, shelve, repeat. I punched in at the time clock and headed to the back room, where my co-workers were already pulling on their work vests. Miguel was there, as always. He'd been doing this job for 12 years. Knew exactly where everything went without checking any lists. Could estimate how long any delivery would take to unload within 5 minutes of accuracy. The best partner you could ask for on the overnight shift. Big one tonight, he said, nodding toward the loading dock. Holiday inventory is starting to come in. 3 pallets of seasonal goods on top of the regular order. I grabbed my vest and joined him by the dock doors. Outside, the driver was already lowering the truck's ramp. Rain had started up again, a light mist that caught the light and made everything look soft and dreamy. We worked in comfortable silence for the first hour, moving boxes from truck to cart to stockroom, canned goods, pasta, breakfast cereals, cleaning supplies, all the ordinary things that fill ordinary kitchens. The store was beautiful at this hour. I know that sounds strange. It's just a grocery store. Fluorescent lights and linoleum floors and aisle after aisle of packaged goods. But there was something peaceful about it when empty. Something almost sacred about all that abundance waiting quietly in the silence. The lights hummed softly overhead. The refrigerator cases murmured their constant, cool song. My footsteps echoed gently as I pushed my cart through the aisles. No announcements over the loudspeakers, no checkout beeps, no crying children or rushed shoppers. Just space, just quiet, just the patient work of making everything ready for tomorrow. I started in the canned vegetable aisle. There's an art to stocking shelves well, labels facing forward, cans lined up in neat rows. Older stock rotated to the front, where customers will reach for it first. It matters more than you might think. A well-organized shelf communicates care. It tells customers that someone is paying attention. I worked my way through green, beans, corn, peas, tomatoes, each can placed precisely, each label turned to show its best face. My hands knew the work without thinking, leaving my mind free to wander. I thought about my grandmother's pantry. She kept it organized in exactly this way. Labels out. Everything in its proper place. She used to let me help her put groceries away when I was small. Everything has a home, she would say. Our job is just to return things to where they belong. I smiled at the memory. She'd been gone for 5 years now, but sometimes in moments like this, she felt very close. Around midnight, I took my first break. The break room was small but comfortable. A round table with mismatched chairs, a refrigerator humming in the corner, a microwave that had seen better days, faded motivational posters on the walls that everyone pretended not to notice. I heated up the leftovers I'd brought from home, rice and vegetables from last night's dinner. Simple food, but satisfying, after 2 hours of physical work. Miguel joined me a few minutes later with his own meal, a sandwich his wife had made for him. He showed me the note she'd tucked inside the bag. Don't work too hard. Love you. The handwriting was neat and careful. She still writes you notes? I asked. He nodded, smiling. Every shift for 15 years, different note each time. Sometimes it's just a smiley face. Sometimes it's a longer message. But there's always something. That's really sweet. Time, 600 winters. She says it's her way of being here with me, even when she can't be. He tucked the note carefully back into the bag. I keep them all, you know. Got a whole drawer full at home. Probably 1,000 notes by now. I thought about that as we finished our meals. 1,000 small gestures of love. 1,000 moments of care, folded into paper and packed alongside sandwiches. That's what marriage could be, at its best. Not grand romantic gestures, but the accumulation of tiny kindnesses over time. After break, I moved to the pasta aisle. This was one of my favorite sections to stock. All those boxes and bags arranged by type and brand. Spaghetti, linguine, penne, rotini. Each one promising the possibility of a home-cooked meal. I thought about all the dinners these boxes would become. Weeknight meals thrown together quickly after long days at work. Sunday suppers where families gathered around tables. First attempts at cooking by young people just learning their way around a kitchen. Comfort food eaten alone at midnight by someone who needed something warm. Every box held a story waiting to happen. I was just the person who made sure they were there when the story was ready to begin. The rain picked up around 2 a.m. I could hear it against the store's roof, even through the fluorescent hum. A steady drumming that made the building feel like a shelter. A warm, dry island in the middle of the wet night. I paused in my work to listen. There's something comforting about being inside when it's raining outside. About having walls and a roof and warmth while the world gets soaked. It makes you feel held somehow, protected, lucky in a small but significant way. I finished the pasta aisle and moved on to breakfast cereals. This section always takes the longest. So many different boxes, so many brands and varieties. The colorful packaging competed for attention, even in the empty store. Cartoon characters in bright letters and promises of deliciousness. I worked methodically from one end to the other. Oat cereals grouped together, corn flakes in their proper place. Sugary children's cereals on the lower shelves where small hands could reach them. Healthier options higher up where parents would make the decisions. The store manager, Mrs. Chen, came by around 3 to check on our progress. She walked the aisles with a clipboard, making notes. But she wasn't looking for problems. She was documenting what needed to be reordered, what was selling well, what had been sitting too long. "Nice work on the canned goods," she said, pausing near me. "Those shelves look beautiful." "Thank you. Miguel did most of that section." She nodded thoughtfully. "He always does good work. So do you. I'm glad to have you both on nights." It was a small compliment, a few words said in passing, but it mattered. Recognition matters. Being seen doing your work well, being acknowledged for care and effort, these things make any job feel worthwhile. The seasonal aisle was next. This was the new stock Miguel had mentioned. Holiday items arriving early for the upcoming season. Special edition candies, themed cookies, decorative items that people would buy to make their homes feel festive. I set up the display carefully, following the diagram corporate had sent, but adjusting slightly where it made more sense. Making sure the most appealing items were at eye level, arranging colors so they complemented each other. There's creativity in retail work, if you're paying attention. Every display tells a small story. Every arrangement invites customers to imagine something. A holiday gathering, a cozy evening at home, a celebration with people you love. I stepped back to look at the finished display. The warm colors glowed under the fluorescent lights. For a moment, I could almost smell cinnamon and nutmeg, even though those scents were only on the packaging. The display was doing its job. It was creating a feeling. My second break came at 4. The rain had gentled again to a soft patter. I stepped out the back door for a moment, standing under the loading dock's overhang. The air was cool and clean, carrying that particular smell of wet pavement and growing things. The delivery truck had left hours ago. The parking lot was quiet. Just the rain and the distant hum of the highway and the occasional car passing on the road out front. I breathed deeply and felt my shoulders relax. 6 hours of work behind me. 2 more to go. The hardest part of any overnight shift is the stretch between 3 and 5, when your body insists it should be sleeping. But I was past the worst of it now. Back inside, I tackled the frozen food section. This was always the coldest part of the job, literally. Opening the freezer cases let out blasts of frigid air. My fingers went numb after just a few minutes of handling frozen packages. But there was efficiency required here. The cases couldn't stay open long, so I worked quickly. Vegetables in, doors closed. Ice cream in, doors closed. Frozen pizzas, frozen dinners, frozen breakfast items. Each category handled swiftly, then sealed away again in their frosty compartments. Between sections, I rubbed my hands together to restore feeling, blew on my fingertips, appreciated the relative warmth of the regular store air. At 5:30, the first morning, employees began to arrive. The bakery staff came in through the back, heading to their ovens to start the day's bread. Soon the store would fill with the smell of fresh baked goods. Customers arriving at opening time would be greeted with that warm, yeasty aroma. The deli counter team arrived next, beginning their prep work, slicing meats, preparing salads, setting out the fresh items that would fill the display cases. The store was waking up. Miguel and I finished our last tasks, breaking down the empty boxes, flattening cardboard for recycling, doing a final walkthrough to make sure nothing had been missed. At 6, we clocked out together. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was gray but brightening. Puddles reflected the slowly emerging light. "Good shift," Miguel said, unlocking his car. "Yeah," I agreed. "See you tonight. Same time, same place." I drove home through the quiet morning streets. The city was just beginning to stir. Commuters starting their cars, dog walkers venturing out, coffee shops flipping their signs to open. When I got home, I showered and made myself a simple breakfast. Toast with butter and jam, a cup of herbal tea. The ordinary rituals of ending my day while others were just beginning theirs. I climbed into bed as the sun finally broke through the clouds. The sheets were cool and welcoming. The pillow accepted my tired head like an old friend. I thought about the store, all those full shelves waiting for customers, all that careful work now invisible as it should be. The best overnight work disappears by morning. It becomes part of the background, part of the ordinary magic that makes a grocery store function. There's dignity in invisible work, in the tasks that keep the world running without fanfare. Tonight, I'd do it all again. Unpack, shelve, arrange, make everything ready for another day. And that was enough. That was more than enough. As sleep began to claim me, my thoughts drifted to another workplace, another kind of quiet labor, an empty office building after dark, a vacuum cleaner's gentle hum, the satisfaction of restoring order to spaces that would be chaotic again by tomorrow. A story I think of as the office cleanup. The elevator doors opened onto the 17th floor, and I stepped out into perfect stillness. The law offices of Hartley, Morrison, and Pierce spread out before me in the dim after-hours lighting. Emergency exit signs glowed red at the far corners. Desktop monitors sat dark and silent. The usual daytime bustle had given way to the kind of quiet that only exists in office buildings after everyone has gone home. I rolled my cleaning cart through the reception area, past the leather sofas and glass coffee tables where clients waited during business hours, past the framed artwork that probably cost more than my annual salary, past the fresh flowers that someone replaced every Monday and Thursday. Tonight marked exactly 6 months since I joined the night cleaning crew for this building. 22 floors, each one assigned to different teams on a rotating schedule. Tonight I had 17 through 19, 3 law firms, 3 different layouts and cultures, 3 sets of offices to clean while their occupants slept at home. Outside the windows, rain streaked down the glass in silver lines. The city lights below looked smeared and soft, transformed by the water into something almost painterly. I paused at the floor-to-ceiling windows for a moment, just watching. From up here, the rain seemed to fall in slow motion. Cars moved like glowing drops along the wet streets. The world felt very far away, very small, and very beautiful. I started with the conference rooms. Lawyers leave conference rooms in various states, sometimes pristine, as if no meeting ever occurred, sometimes chaotic with coffee cups and crumpled paper and whiteboards covered in indecipherable legal strategy. Tonight, the main conference room looked like a battle had taken place. The long mahogany table was littered with legal pads, uncapped pens, and the remains of what must have been a very long working lunch. Sandwich wrappers, empty chip bags, soda cans starting to form sticky rings on the expensive wood. I worked methodically, trash first, then wiping down all surfaces, stacking the legal pads neatly rather than throwing them away. Lawyers were particular about their notes, capping every pen and placing them in the ceramic holder at the center of the table. The whiteboard required special care. Some writing was labeled "Do not erase" in emphatic capital letters. Other sections were clearly meant to be temporary. I'd learned to tell the difference through experience. Permanent marker meant important. Dry erase marker in messy handwriting meant safe to clean. I erased what needed erasing and left what needed to stay. Then I straightened the chairs around the table. 12 leather chairs, each one pushed back at a different angle by whoever had sat there. I aligned them perfectly, giving the room a sense of order it hadn't known all day. The smaller conference rooms were easier. Just quick wipes of the tables and a check of the trash bins. One room had a single teacup abandoned on the windowsill. I washed it in the kitchenette and left it drying in the rack. Tomorrow morning, someone would find it clean and wonder how it got there. The corner offices belonged to the senior partners. I'd never met Mr. Hartley, Mr. Morrison, or Ms. Pierce, but I knew them through their offices, through the objects they surrounded themselves with, through the way they maintained or failed to maintain their personal spaces. Mr. Hartley was old school. His office smelled of leather and the faint ghost of pipe tobacco, though smoking hadn't been allowed in the building for decades. His desk was always organized. Fountain pens in a brass holder, family photos in silver frames, a worn leather blotter that probably dated back to when he first made partner. I dusted carefully around his things, never moving anything out of position. These objects were arranged with intention. They told a story about the kind of lawyer Mr. Hartley wanted to be: traditional, trustworthy, rooted in something older than the modern world. Mr. Morrison was different. His office was sleek and minimal. A glass desk with almost nothing on it. Modern art on the walls. Abstract shapes that probably meant something profound but looked to me like colored squares. No personal photos anywhere. Just a single orchid on the windowsill that someone must be paid to keep alive. This office was easy to clean. There was nothing to work around. I wiped the glass desk until it was spotless, vacuumed the pristine carpet, and moved on. Ms. Pierce's office was my favorite. She was clearly someone who lived in her workspace. Books stacked everywhere, some open, some marked with colorful, sticky notes. A small couch where she apparently napped, sometimes, judging by the folded blanket on one arm. Photos of what looked like hiking trips and family gatherings. A collection of small objects on her windowsill. A seashell, a smooth stone, a tiny ceramic cat. The most striking thing about her office was the handwritten notes taped to her bulletin board. Thank you cards from clients. Drawings clearly made by children. A faded newspaper clipping about some case she must have won years ago. I never read these things closely. That would have felt like an intrusion. But I noticed them. They told me that Ms. Pierce was someone who cared about more than winning cases. She kept the human connections. She remembered why she'd become a lawyer in the first place. I cleaned around her things with extra gentleness, straightened the blanket on the couch, watered the small succulent on her desk that looked slightly thirsty, made sure everything was exactly as she'd left it, just cleaner. The associate offices came next. These were smaller spaces along the interior hallways. Young lawyers still paying their dues, working long hours, trying to prove themselves. Their offices showed the strain. Energy drink cans in nearly every trash bin. Fast food wrappers from late nights at their desks. Family photos positioned so they could be seen from the desk chair. Reminders of why they were working so hard. One young associate's office had a pillow and blanket behind the door. I'd seen them before. Some nights, I'd find the blanket on the floor beside the desk, as if she'd slept here rather than going home. Tonight, everything was neatly stored, away. Maybe she'd actually made it home for once. I hoped so. These young people worked too hard. I saw the evidence every night. The empty coffee cups accumulating, the desk chairs pushed back at odd hours, the trash bins full of the debris of long days that bled into long nights. I couldn't change their workloads, but I could give them clean spaces to return to. Fresh starts each morning. Small mercies in the form of empty trash and wiped desks and straightened chairs. Around 1:30, I took my break in the kitchenette on this floor. The law firm's kitchen was nicer than my own at home. Marble countertops, a refrigerator stocked with sparkling water and fancy coffee creamers, an espresso machine that probably cost as much as my car, time 700 years. I made myself a cup of regular coffee from the drip machine and sat by the window. The rain was still falling. The city below had grown quieter, as much of a city like this ever gets quiet. Fewer cars, fewer lights and windows. The world settling into its deepest sleep. My phone buzzed. A message from my daughter. "Mom, you awake?" I smiled and typed back, "Always. What's up, mija?" She was 22 and in her last year of nursing school, also working odd hours, night shifts at the hospital for her clinicals. We often found ourselves awake at the same strange times, taking a break between patients. "How's work?" "Peaceful tonight." "Rainy." "How are your patients?" "Mostly sleeping." One sweet old man keeps telling me about his wife. They were married 58 years. I could picture her at the nurse's station, sneaking a moment to text her mother. She'd wanted to be a nurse since she was 10 years old. Some children change their minds a dozen times about what they want to be. Elena never wavered. "I'm proud of you," I typed. "Get back to work. Love you." "Love you too, Mama. Take care of those law firm people." I finished my coffee and got back to work. The brief connection with my daughter had refreshed me better than the caffeine. The common areas came next. The reception desk where the firm's elegant receptionist spent her days. The waiting area with its expensive magazines and more comfortable chairs than most people had in their living rooms. The hallways with their thick carpet and framed certificates and photos of the partners shaking hands with important-looking people. I vacuumed slowly, working in careful lines. The carpet was a deep blue that showed every footprint if you looked at it from the right angle. By morning, fresh footprints would already be forming. But for now, the carpet was perfect. Even lines stretching from wall to wall, evidence of care. I dusted the framed items on the walls without really reading them. Law degrees, awards, photos of golf outings and charity galas. The accumulated proof of successful careers. Sometimes I wondered what this building would think if it could think. All these humans coming and going, building careers, making money, celebrating victories, nursing defeats, and then leaving at the end of each day, replaced by people like me who moved through the empty spaces, setting everything right again. We were the tide. The lawyers were the sand castles. Every night, we smoothed everything flat. Every morning, they built again. By 3:30, the 17th floor was finished. I stood at the elevator and looked back at my work. Everything polished and in its place. Everything ready for another day of urgent meetings and important documents and the serious business of law. None of the lawyers who worked here would notice. That was the point. The best cleaning is invisible. It simply removes the obstacles so that other work can happen. It's the silence that lets the music play, the blank canvas that invites the painting. I moved up to the 18th floor. Another law firm, different specialties, different partners, but the same basic rhythm of clean, straighten, restore. This firm handled corporate law, mergers and acquisitions. The offices here were even larger, even more expensively furnished. The artwork was probably worth more than my house. But the trash still needed emptying. The desks still needed wiping. The bathrooms still needed cleaning. Money doesn't exempt anyone from the basic realities of existing in physical space. Around 4:30, I found something unusual. In one of the smaller offices on the 19th floor, a desk lamp was still on. And in the chair, fast asleep, with her head on her arms, was a woman I didn't recognize. I hesitated at the doorway. This happens sometimes. People working so late that they accidentally fell asleep at their desks. Usually, the sound of my cleaning cart woke them, but this woman was deeply asleep. Her breathing was slow and even. Her face, what I could see of it, looked peaceful. There was a case file spread open beneath her arms, a half-empty coffee cup within reach, a photo on her desk of a dog, a golden retriever with a ridiculous smile. I cleaned around her as quietly as possible, emptied the trash without rustling the bag, skipped the vacuum, wiped down the visible surfaces with extra care not to make any noise. Before I left, I did something I'd never done before. I took the throw blanket from the small couch in the corner and draped it gently over her shoulders. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Just pulled the blanket closer in her sleep, as naturally as if it had always been there. I slipped out quietly and moved on to the next office. Some kindnesses don't require names, don't require recognition, don't require anything at all except the simple decision to care about another person, even if you'll never see them awake. My shift ended at 5:30. The rain had stopped sometime in the last hour. Looking out the window on my final walkthrough, I could see the first hints of dawn on the horizon. The clouds were starting to thin. The city lights were beginning to compete with the approaching daylight. I gathered my cart and took the elevator down to the basement where the cleaning supplies were stored. Restocked everything for the next shift. Filed my completed checklist with the supervisor's office. Outside, the air was fresh and cool. Wet pavement, clean sky. The particular feeling of a city that's just starting to wake up. I walked to the bus stop, thinking about the sleeping woman on the 19th floor. She'd wake up soon, find herself covered with a blanket she didn't remember taking. Maybe she'd wonder about it for a moment before the demands of the day took over. Maybe she'd never think about it at all. Either way was fine. The kindness had happened. That was enough. The bus arrived, mostly empty at this hour. I took a seat by the window and watched the city pass. Shops still dark. Apartments starting to show lights in their windows. The whole world slowly coming back to life. 6 months of overnight shifts. Hundreds of offices cleaned. Thousands of small tasks completed in the quiet hours when no one was watching. It was good work. Honest work. The kind that leaves the world a little more orderly than you found it. And tomorrow night, I'd do it all again. As the bus carried me home through the early morning quiet, my mind wandered to a different kind of night duty altogether. Another building, another late shift, someone keeping watch in a lobby while the building slept above. A story I call the security lobby chat. It was nearly 1 in the morning when I finally left my cousin's apartment on the 32nd floor. She'd needed help setting up her new printer, which had turned into dinner, which had turned into 3 episodes of a baking competition we both pretended not to love. The elevator descended smoothly, floor numbers ticking backward in an orange digital display. I watched my reflection in the polished doors, tired eyes, a borrowed umbrella tucked under my arm. The faint satisfaction of an evening well spent. When the doors opened to the lobby, the rain was the first thing I noticed. Not heard through windows anymore, but visible through the floor-to-ceiling glass entrance. Sheets of water cascading down, turning the street into a river of reflected lights. The second thing I noticed was the security guard. He sat behind a curved reception desk, positioned to see both the elevators and the front entrance. A man in his early 60s, maybe. Silver hair cropped close to his head, glasses with thin wire frames, a navy blue uniform that somehow looked more like a professor's cardigan than a guard's outfit. He was reading, not scrolling through a phone, not watching monitors with glazed eyes, actually reading a paperback book, held open in one large hand while the other rested on the desk beside a thermos. I paused near the seating area, watching the rain through the windows. My rideshare app showed a 12-minute wait. Surge pricing because of the weather. I sighed softly. Quite a storm tonight. His voice was warm, unhurried, the kind of voice that seemed designed for reading bedtime stories to grandchildren. I turned, finding him looking up from his book with a gentle smile. It really is, I agreed. I was hoping it would ease up. Weather report says it'll rain till dawn. He closed his book, keeping one finger between the pages to mark his spot. You waiting for a ride? I nodded. 12 minutes, apparently. Plenty of time. He gestured toward the leather chairs arranged near his desk. No sense standing there like you're waiting for a bus that's not coming. Something about his tone made me smile. Not pushy, not overly friendly in that way that sets off alarm bells, just genuinely hospitable, as if the lobby were his living room and I was a neighbor who dropped by. I settled into one of the chairs. They were surprisingly comfortable, the kind of furniture chosen by someone who understood that people actually sit in lobbies, not just pass through them. Thank you. I set my bag beside my feet, the borrowed umbrella leaning against the arm of the chair. I'm sorry if I'm interrupting your reading. He waved the concern away. I've read this one 4 times already. The pages aren't going anywhere. I glanced at the cover. A detective novel from an author whose name I vaguely recognized. 4 times? Some books are like that. He turned it over in his hands, looking at the worn spine with something like affection. You know exactly what's going to happen. And somehow, that's the comfort. I understood that completely. There were movies I'd watched dozens of times, songs I'd played until I knew every breath the singer took. Familiarity wasn't boring. Sometimes it was the only thing that felt truly safe. I have a few of those, I admitted. Books that feel like old friends. That's exactly right. He set the book down beside his thermos and unscrewed the cap. The lobby filled with the faint aroma of chamomile. Old friends you can pick up again after years and find them unchanged. Same jokes, same wisdom, same ending you secretly hoped might be different this time. He poured tea into the thermos cap, which doubled as a small cup. Steam curled upward in the lobby's warmth. I introduced myself, and he nodded as if filing the name away somewhere safe. You're visiting 32 tonight? The woman with all the plants? I laughed softly. My cousin. She does have a lot of plants. I've helped carry about 6 of them up from delivery trucks. He sipped his tea. She always apologizes like she's asking me to move a piano. They're plants, I tell her. Plants are light. Pianos I'd need warning about. The image made me smile. My cousin did have a tendency to over-apologize. It was part of her charm and occasionally exhausting. How long have you worked here? I asked, genuinely curious. 7 years in this building. He settled back in his chair, one hand wrapped around his tea. 34 in security overall. Started when I was 28. Different world then. Do you like it? It was a simple question, but he considered it carefully before answering. I do. His voice was thoughtful. People assume this job is boring, sitting here all night, watching empty elevators, signing for packages. And yes, it's quiet, but boring isn't the word I'd choose. What word would you choose? He thought about that too. I liked that about him. He didn't rush his answers. Every response was weighed, considered, delivered with intention. Contemplative? He nodded to himself. Yes, that's the right word. This job is contemplative. Outside, the rain intensified briefly. A gust of wind threw water against the glass like someone had emptied a bucket from above. The sound was startling for a moment, then subsided into a steady, rhythmic drumming. I spend a lot of hours thinking, he continued, about my life, mostly, the choices I made, the roads I didn't take. Not in a regretful way. I'm past that. More like reviewing a story I've been writing for 63 years. That's a long story. Some chapters are longer than others. He smiled into his tea. The 80s took forever. The 2000s went by in a blink. Time's funny like that. I found myself leaning forward slightly, drawn into the gentle rhythm of his conversation. There was something almost hypnotic about talking to someone who had no agenda, no rush, no destination in mind. Can I ask what chapters you think about most? He didn't seem offended by the personal question. If anything, he looked pleased to have someone interested. My 20s were confusing. He held up one finger. My 30s were ambitious. My 40s were, how do I put this, humbling. He paused, running through some mental calculation. My 50s were repair work, fixing what I'd broken in my 30s and 40s. And my 60s, he gestured around the lobby with a sweep of his hand. My 60s are peace. I sat with that word. Peace. It wasn't what most people described when they talked about getting older. Usually it was complaints about health, nostalgia for youth, lists of things they wish they'd done differently. That's beautiful, I said quietly. It took work. He set his tea down. Peace isn't something that just arrives. You have to clear out space for it. Let go of old anger. Forgive people you swore you'd never forgive. Forgive yourself for things you're embarrassed to even remember. His eyes drifted to the window. The rain continued its gentle assault on the glass. I spent 15 years mad at my father. His voice was soft. He was a difficult man. Harsh. Not cruel exactly, but cold. Like he had all these feelings locked up inside that he never learned to express. I waited, sensing there was more. He passed when I was 42. The guard folded his hands on the desk, and I carried that anger for another decade after that, mad at a man who was already gone. You know what that does? Nothing. Absolutely nothing except make you tired. How did you let it go? He considered the question. I started thinking about who he was before he was my father. He looked at me with those thoughtful eyes. He was a kid once, a young man with dreams, someone's son, just like me. Whatever made him hard, it wasn't born in him. It happened to him. That doesn't excuse it, I said, gently. No. He agreed without hesitation. It doesn't excuse anything, but it explains it. And sometimes explanation is enough. Sometimes understanding is the first step toward not needing someone to apologize. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The rideshare was 7 minutes away now. I left it there. You have a family? I asked. His face changed, softened into something that looked like pure light. Wife of 37 years. He pulled out his phone and turned it toward me. The lock screen showed a woman with silver-streaked hair and a wide smile. That's my Eleanor. She's the reason I know anything about peace at all. I studied the photo. She looked like someone who laughed easily, someone who made ordinary moments feel special. 3 kids. He swiped to another photo. A group shot with adult children and what looked like grandchildren. 2 grandkids with number 3 on the way. That's the real story, right there. You look happy together. We are. He pocketed the phone. Not always, mind you. 37 years isn't smooth sailing. We've had storms. He nodded toward the rain-soaked window. Storms worse than that one. But we weathered them. What's the secret? He laughed. It was a warm sound, unhurried and genuine. No secret. He shook his head. People always want a secret. There isn't one. You just wake up every day and choose each other again. Even when you're tired, even when you're frustrated, even when there's someone else who seems easier. He paused, choosing his next words with care. Marriage isn't about finding someone who completes you. That's movie talk. It's about finding someone you want to be incomplete with. Someone you want to figure it out with. Someone whose mess you don't mind being part of. I let those words settle. They felt true in a way that bypassed my brain and went straight to somewhere deeper. My parents divorced when I was 12, I found myself saying. I've always wondered if that's why I'm scared of commitment. He nodded slowly. No judgment in his expression. No unsolicited advice hovering on his lips. Divorce leaves marks. His voice was gentle. My sister went through one. Her kids are grown now, and I can still see how it shaped them. Did they turn out okay? They turned out human. He smiled softly, which means complicated, which means still figuring things out. Same as everyone else. He reached for his tea again, found it empty, set it aside. Here's what I know. His eyes met mine with kindness. What happened to you as a child isn't your fault, but how you carry it as an adult is your responsibility. Not blame, responsibility. Different things. I nodded slowly, and fear of commitment isn't a life sentence. He leaned back in his chair. It's just a warning sign. Your heart putting up a flag that says, be careful here, pay attention. Doesn't mean you can't commit. It means you commit thoughtfully. I never thought of it that way. Most people don't. He chuckled softly. We treat our fears like enemies. Beat them. Conquer them. Destroy them. Maybe some fears need that. But others just need to be heard. Outside, a car pulled up to the curb. The headlights swept across the lobby briefly before settling. My ride, probably. But I didn't move yet. Can I ask you something personal? You've been asking personal things for 10 minutes. His eyes crinkled. Why stop now? I smiled. Do you ever get lonely, working nights like this? He considered the question seriously, as he did with all questions. Alone and lonely aren't the same thing. He looked around the quiet lobby. I'm alone for 8 hours every night, but lonely? Rarely. What's the difference? Loneliness is a disconnection. He touched his chest. A feeling like nobody knows who you really are. Like you're invisible even in a crowd. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Being alone is just physical, a state. You can be alone and still feel connected to the people you love, to yourself, to the world. How? I think about Eleanor. His voice warmed at her name. I know she's home right now, probably asleep, probably dreaming about something she won't remember in the morning. And just knowing she exists, that she's there, that she's mine and I'm hers, that's enough. He pointed to his book. And I have my friends here. He smiled at the worn paperback. Characters I've known for decades. Authors who wrote truths that still surprise me. That's connection too. My phone buzzed again. The driver was waiting. I stood reluctantly, gathering my bag and the borrowed umbrella. Thank you. The words came from somewhere, genuine. This was unexpected. He rose from his chair and walked around the desk to shake my hand. His grip was warm and firm. You'll figure things out. He said it like a fact, not a platitude. You're asking good questions. People who ask good questions usually find their way. I hope so. I know so. He released my hand. And when you visit 32 again, stop by. I'm here most nights. I promised I would. And I meant it. The rain hit me the moment I stepped outside. Cold and real after the lobby's warmth. I opened the umbrella and hurried to the waiting car. Inside, I gave the driver my address and settled back against the seat. The city passed by in streams of water and reflected light. Storefronts with their gates pulled down. Apartment windows glowing yellow and blue. Intersections blinking their patient rhythms. I thought about what he had said. About peace being something you clear space for. About fear being something you listen to instead of fight. About choosing someone every day instead of just once. The driver asked if I wanted the radio on. I said no, thank you. The rain was enough. We crossed a bridge I crossed every day, but rarely noticed. Tonight I noticed. The water below, dark and restless. The lights strung along the cables like stars refusing to give up. The way the city looked both massive and intimate at the same time. Home was 15 minutes away. I thought about my apartment, the small routines that made it feel mine, the books stacked on my nightstand, the mug I always use for tea, the window where I sometimes stood and watched the street below. Small things. Maybe small things were the point. That security guard worked nights in an empty lobby. He read the same book 4 times. He thought about his father and his wife, and the decades that had shaped him, and he called it peace. Maybe peace wasn't a destination. Maybe it was more like a practice. Something you return to again and again, like a familiar song, or a worn paperback, or a conversation with a kind stranger at 1 a.m. The car turned onto my street. I thanked the driver and stepped out into the rain, opened the umbrella, walked the short distance to my building's entrance. Inside, the lobby was empty. No security guard here, just a mail room and an elevator and the faint smell of cleaning products. I rode up to my floor, unlocked my door, set the umbrella by the entrance to dry. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it. Quiet. Waiting. Mine. I made a cup of tea. Chamomile, like he had. Stood by the window and watched the rain paint patterns on the glass. Somewhere across the city, he was still at his desk. Reading. Thinking. Being alone without being lonely. I understood something tonight that I hadn't before. There were people everywhere carrying wisdom, in lobbies, in cafes, in late-night ride shares. You just had to be willing to listen. You just had to ask good questions. And sometimes, like tonight, you had to stay a few minutes longer than planned. Let the ride share wait. Let the rain continue. let a stranger become, briefly, something like a teacher. I finished my tea, set the mug in the sink, got ready for bed with the kind of slowness that felt intentional rather than tired. When I finally lay down, the sheets were cool and welcoming. The rain continued its soft percussion on the windows, and I felt something I couldn't quite name. Not quite happiness, not quite peace, something closer to hope. The hope that 30 years from now, I might sit in some quiet place and look back at my story with the same gentle acceptance that guard showed tonight. That I might find someone to choose every day. That I might learn to listen to my fears instead of fighting them. That I might eventually clear out enough space for peace to find me. The rain sang me toward sleep, and in that gentle darkness, I thanked him silently for the conversation, for the wisdom, for reminding me that the late shift wasn't just about work. It was about all the quiet hours where we figure out who we're becoming, one night at a time. And as my thoughts drifted into softer shapes, I imagined another journey beginning. Perhaps a quiet soul stepping onto a train platform in the hours before sunrise, carrying their own story through the fading darkness. A journey that might feel something like this. The Dawn Commute. The alarm didn't wake me. The silence did. At 4:47 in the morning, the rain that had been drumming all night suddenly stopped. The absence of sound pulled me from sleep like a hand on my shoulder. I lay there for a moment, listening to the quiet. My bedroom window was cracked open, and the air that drifted in smelled clean, washed, like the city had been rinsed and was waiting to dry. Then my actual alarm went off. 4:50, the early shift. I worked at a bakery downtown. Not as a baker, I didn't have those skills, but in the back, preparing the day's supplies, measuring ingredients, setting up workstations, making sure the ovens were preheated by the time the head baker arrived at 6. It was a position I'd taken temporarily 2 years ago and never found a reason to leave. The hours were unusual. The work was repetitive. But there was something about being awake when most people slept that made me feel like I knew a secret the rest of the world didn't. I got dressed in the dim light of a single lamp. Work clothes that smelled faintly of flour no matter how many times I washed them. Comfortable shoes with non-slip soles, a jacket I'd had since college that somehow still fit. The apartment was quiet around me. My roommate worked normal hours and wouldn't be awake for another 3. I moved carefully, aware of every creaking floorboard. Coffee would wait until I got to the bakery. One of the perks of the position was unlimited access to the espresso machine. Some mornings, that alone was enough to get me out of bed. Outside, the city was transformed. The storm had left everything glistening. Streetlights reflected off wet pavement in long, wavering streaks. Parked cars wore beads of water like jewelry. The air was cool and damp, the kind of freshness that only exists in the hours before sunrise after a night of rain. I walked to the train station, 8 blocks that I knew by heart. The streets were nearly empty. A delivery truck rumbled past on its way to restaurants that wouldn't open for hours. A jogger in reflective gear ran by without looking up. A tabby cat watched me from a fire escape, its eyes catching the streetlight. I liked this version of the city, the between hours version, when everyone who was out had a reason to be. The train station was underground, stairs descending into fluorescent light, the smell of old coffee and damp concrete. electronic boards announcing arrivals and departures in orange letters that flickered occasionally. At this hour, the platform held maybe 10 people, spread out along its length like they'd been placed deliberately to maximize distance. There was a woman in nursing scrubs staring at her phone, a man in a security uniform eating something from a paper bag, a teenager with headphones and a skateboard, nodding to a rhythm only he could hear. I found my usual spot near the middle of the platform, close to where the doors would open on the second car. The train's arrival was 7 minutes away. I stood there, letting my thoughts drift. The night before felt like a week ago. My cousin's apartment, the printer that took forever to set up, the baking show we pretended not to watch, the security guard and his thermos of chamomile tea. I'd slept well despite the short hours. Sometimes the best sleep came after good conversation, like the mind needed to process something meaningful before it could truly rest. The platform rumbled faintly, train approaching from the tunnel. When the doors opened, I stepped into a car that was nearly empty, chose a window seat facing forward, watched the platform slide away as the train began to move. The subway at 5 in the morning was a different creature than the subway at 5 in the evening. No crowds, no pushing, no one complaining about delays or muttering into phones about being late. Just the gentle sway of the car and the rhythms of the tracks. I closed my eyes briefly, not to sleep, just to rest them, to feel the motion without watching it. The train stopped at 3 stations before mine. At each one, a few people got off, a few got on. The gradual shift of the city waking up, one commuter at a time. At the second stop, an elderly man boarded. He moved slowly, one hand gripping the pole near the door. His coat was old but well maintained. His shoes were polished. He looked around the car, assessing the options, then chose the seat across the aisle from me. We didn't speak. Not at first. Just 2 people sharing space in the early hours. But then the train lurched. Some mechanical hiccup that made everyone grab for stability. The elderly man's bag slipped from his lap and spilled open. I was up before I thought about it. Kneeling on the train floor, gathering scattered items, a folded newspaper, a small container of pills, a wrapped sandwich that looked homemade, a photograph in a simple frame. I handed them back one by one. When I reached the photograph, I paused. It showed a woman, beautiful, maybe 60 in the photo, smiling at the camera with the kind of joy that couldn't be faked. "My wife," the man said. His voice was soft, accented in a way I couldn't quite place. "She passed 3 years ago. I'm sorry." He took the photograph and held it for a moment, not looking at me, looking at her. I visit her every week. He tucked the photo carefully back into his bag. "The cemetery opens at 6. I like to be there when the gates unlock." I returned to my seat. "That's a lovely tradition." 52 years of marriage. He zipped the bag closed. You don't just stop talking to someone after 52 years. The train swayed gently. Outside the windows, darkness began to lighten at the edges. The first hints of dawn creeping into the underground. "Do you tell her about your week?" I asked. He smiled. It was a smile that had seen decades of practice. Everything. He adjusted his coat. What I ate, what I watched on television, who I saw at the market. She always liked to know the details. "She sounds wonderful." She was. His voice didn't waver. In my memory, She still is. The train announced the next stop. His stop, apparently. He gathered his bag and rose slowly. "Young people think love ends," he said, standing in the aisle. "They think death is a period at the end of a sentence, but it's not." He looked down at me with eyes that had seen more than I could imagine. "Love is a comma." He touched his chest. "The sentence continues, just differently." The doors opened. He stepped onto the platform, turned back once, nodded at me, and walked toward the stairs. I watched until he disappeared from view. Then I sat back in my seat and thought about commas, about sentences that continued, about 52 years of marriage and weekly visits to a cemetery that opened at 6. My stop came 3 minutes later. I climbed the stairs to street level and emerged into a city that was beginning to wake. The sky was pale gray now, not bright yet, but no longer fully dark. That in-between hour when the stars had faded, but the sun hadn't quite arrived. The streets were wet. Puddles reflected the slowly brightening sky. A few early risers walked with purpose toward various obligations. I walked the 4 blocks to the bakery. It was a small place, family-owned for 3 generations. The kind of bakery that smelled exactly like you'd want a bakery to smell. Warm bread and butter, and something sweet always in the oven. The front was still dark. I entered through the back, using the key they'd given me on my first day. Inside, the ovens hummed in standby mode. The steel counters gleamed from last night's cleaning. Everything was waiting. I started my routine. Ovens first, preheat to 350 for the morning bread, 400 for the croissants that the head baker would shape herself when she arrived. Then ingredients, flour measured into massive mixing bowls, yeast activated in warm water, butter cut into cubes and returned to the refrigerator until needed. The work was physical, but not demanding, rhythmic, meditative, almost. My hands knew what to do without my brain needing to give instructions. I made myself coffee after the first round of prep. Strong espresso from the machine we use for the cafe side of things. Added a splash of cream and a spoonful of sugar. Stood by the back window and drank it slowly. The alley behind the bakery wasn't much to look at. Dumpsters, a fire escape, pipes that dripped even when it hadn't rained. But today, the storm had transformed it. Water pooled in uneven patches, reflecting the pale sky. A pigeon bathed in one of the puddles, completely unbothered by my presence at the window. I thought about the man on the train, visiting his wife every week, talking to her like she could hear. Maybe she could. I didn't know what I believed about things like that, but I liked the idea of love being a comma, of the sentence continuing. The head baker arrived at 5:50. Her name was Beatrice. She was 64 and had been baking since she was 12. Her grandmother started this bakery. Her mother ran it for 40 years. Now it was hers. "Good morning." She hung up her coat and tied on an apron in one smooth motion. "Ovens ready?" "Yes." She smiled. "You look thoughtful today. Something on your mind?" "Just thinking about sentences." She raised an eyebrow but didn't press. That was one of the things I liked about Beatrice. She let silence exist. We worked in comfortable quiet for the next hour. She shaped croissants with hands that moved faster than my eyes could follow. I handled the simpler tasks, washing bowls as they emptied, carrying trays to the proofing area, making sure she had everything she needed before she needed it. At 6:30, the first loaves of bread came out of the oven. The smell filled the entire building. That warm, yeasty, golden smell that meant morning was real, that the day had officially begun. Beatrice cut a corner from one of the loaves and handed it to me, still steaming. "For being here on time," she said, "in the rain." I ate it slowly. The crust crackled. The inside was soft and warm and tasted like everything a bakery should. Promise. "Beatrice," I said, without really planning to. "Can I ask you something?" She didn't stop working. "You can always ask. How did you know this was what you wanted to do?" Her hands paused briefly over a tray of unbaked rolls. "I didn't," she said. "Not at first. When I was young, I wanted to be a dancer, then a teacher, then a veterinarian." She resumed her work. "The bakery was just here, always present. I helped my mother because that's what children did. Took over when she got sick because someone had to. And somewhere along the way, I realized I loved it. But you didn't choose it. Time 600 moons. Didn't I?" She looked at me with those sharp eyes. "Every morning I wake up. Every morning I come here. Every morning I decide to keep going. That's a choice." I thought about that. "I worry sometimes," I admitted, "that I'm wasting time, that I should have a plan, a direction." Beatrice slid a tray into the oven and closed the door gently. "Plans are overrated." She wiped her hands on her apron. "They make you think life is supposed to go a certain way. Then you spend all your energy being disappointed when it doesn't. So what do you do instead? You pay attention." She tapped her temple. "You notice what makes you feel alive. You follow that. And you trust that the rest will figure itself out." She turned to start another batch of dough. "You like it here." It wasn't a question. "I can tell. You're not just going through the motions. You care about the bread." I did care. I hadn't realized how much until she said it. "Maybe that's enough for now," Beatrice continued. "Maybe caring about something simple is exactly where you need to be." I nodded slowly. The next hour passed in a rhythm of work and warmth. At 7:30, the front of the bakery opened. I could hear the little bell above the door chiming as the first customers arrived. The murmur of voices, the clatter of trays being set in the display case. My shift was technically over, but I lingered, as I often did. I carried a final tray of pastries to the front, set it on the counter for the morning staff to arrange, looked through the window at the street outside. The city was fully awake now, people hurrying to work with coffee cups in hand, cars waiting at red lights, the occasional bus whooshing by, the child walking with a parent, dragging a backpack along the wet sidewalk. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the city still wore its aftermath. Damp streets, dripping awnings, that lingering freshness in the air. I clocked out and said goodbye to Beatrice. She was elbow deep in dough and barely looked up, but she waved. Outside, the morning light was soft, gray with hints of gold, the kind of light that made everything look like a photograph from decades past. I didn't take the train home. Instead, I walked, slowly, through streets that were starting to fill with people, but weren't crowded yet. I passed a flower shop where the owner was setting out buckets of tulips, a cafe where the barista was wiping down outdoor tables, a newsstand where an old man was arranging magazines, the patience of someone who had done it every day for decades. The city was performing its morning rituals, and I was part of it. one small figure moving through the choreography. I stopped at a bench in a small park, sat down, let the morning air settle around me. A few joggers passed, a woman walking 3 dogs at once, an old couple sitting on the next bench, sharing a thermos of something hot. I thought about the night shift, the security guard in his lobby, the grocery crew stocking shelves, the hotel clerk waiting for guests who arrived at odd hours, and now the morning shift, taking over, continuing the city's endless cycle. We were all part of something larger, something that didn't need us individually, but somehow included us anyway. I pulled out my phone. No messages, just the time. 8:04. My roommate would be awake now, probably making coffee, probably wondering if I'd brought home anything from the bakery. I had. A small bag of croissants in my work bag. Beatrice always let me take the ones that were slightly imperfect. They tasted exactly the same. I stood, stretched, began the walk home. The streets were busier now, the morning rush in full swing. But I moved against the current, heading away from downtown, while everyone else headed toward it. There was something peaceful about going the opposite direction, like swimming upstream without the struggle. I passed the train station where I'd started the day, thought about the man with the photograph, wondered if he was at the cemetery now, talking to his wife, telling her about the weather, the train, the stranger who helped pick up his spilled belongings. Love is a comma. The sentence continues. I reached my building, climbed the stairs, unlocked the door. My roommate was in the kitchen, exactly as predicted, coffee in hand, hair still messy from sleep. You brought croissants. It wasn't a question. She could probably smell them. Of course. We sat at the small kitchen table. She poured me coffee without asking. I set out the croissants on a plate we'd bought together at a flea market years ago. Outside the window, the city continued its morning. Horns honking in the distance. Voices drifting up from the street. The rumble of a garbage truck making its rounds. How was the early shift? My roommate asked around a bite of pastry. Good. I sipped my coffee. Quiet, normal. She nodded. We ate in comfortable silence. After breakfast, I showered, changed into soft clothes, drew the curtains against the brightening day. My schedule was inverted. I worked when others slept, and slept when others worked. It had taken months to adjust. Now it felt natural. I lay down in bed, pulled the blankets up, let my body sink into the mattress. The room was dim. The sounds of the city were muffled. I could hear my roommate moving around the apartment, getting ready for her own day. It was comforting. Someone else awake while I drifted off. I thought about the late shift. All the people who worked while the city slept. The invisible labor that kept everything running. And I thought about the Dawn Commute. The bridge between night and day. The quiet hours when the world handed off responsibility from one shift to the next. I was part of that handoff. One small person in a city of millions, doing simple work, paying attention, caring about the bread. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. I closed my eyes. Let the rhythm of sleep begin. Outside, the day continued without me. And inside, wrapped in blankets and quiet, I trusted that when I woke, the city would still be there. Still turning, still waiting, still holding space for the next late shift, and the next dawn commute, and all the quiet stories in between. And so we come to the end of another evening together. We've walked through the quiet hours of the late shift, the hotel desk in the middle of the night, the grocery store restocking its shelves, the empty office waiting for morning, the security lobby where wisdom was shared over chamomile tea, and the Dawn Commute that carries us from darkness into light. These are the hours most people sleep through. But tonight, you've been awake with me, and now, perhaps, you're ready to join them. Let the memory of rain, always falling somewhere, be your lullaby. Let the stories we've shared settle into your dreams like old friends. Sleep well, dream gently, and know that tomorrow the city will continue its endless rhythm. Until next time, good night.